I'm going to welcome Nia, Nia Clatter, who will be our moderator today. So Nia has been working in responsible tourism for years. She's an expert in the field, and she will be helping to moderate the panel. So welcome, Nia.
Thank you very much, Alex, and welcome everyone. It's been a fabulous morning for me in my time zone. It's been so great of seeing the award ceremony and hearing from all the nominees and all the winners. It's been really great to see, especially considering because the last few years were a bit difficult. So it's really been inspiring to see that the initiatives and projects have been working on making progress. So that was great. My name is Nia Clatter. I'm a responsible tourism expert and consultant, and I actually had the honor of meeting many of the nominees and winners in many years ago when I was actually working with EXO Travel as sustainability coordinator. Before we start the panel, just to get started, tourism, we all know that tourism has long been a cornerstone of Asia's economic, cultural landscape. And we all know that COVID-19, the pandemic, brought the global tourism industry to a standstill. And it really forced us to rethink the way we approach tourism, the way we approach travel, and its impact on people and the planet. And now in this panel, we want to dive deeper into that whole issue of sustainable, responsible tourism, the initiatives and projects. We want to explore the current state of tourism in Asia, and we want to assess the post-pandemic impacts. We want to discuss the way forward for sustainable and responsible tourism practices. And for that, we've got brilliant panelists from the tourism industry, and we will discuss the recovery strategies implemented across Asia. We will also examine the role of sustainable practices in building resilience and what the future holds for the tourism sector in the region. As I said, we've got three brilliant panelists with us. We have Ayako Ezaki, who's the Director of Training Strategies and Development at Training Aid. We have Benjamin Le-Philibert, who's the founder and managing director at Light Blue Environmental Consulting. And we have Bijan Kazai, who's the CEO at Risk Layer Hotel Resilient. Welcome, everyone. Do you maybe want to introduce yourself with a few sentences? Let's get started with Ayako.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for organizing this program and also this panel. I'm really excited to be able to share some thoughts and ideas through this panel. I had the pleasure of being part of the award program this time as part of the jury. And I've been involved actively in the area of sustainable and responsible travel for many years, and had the pleasure of working, because my area of focus is really training and capacity building, and that I share with some of the nominees and winners today from many of the schools that you work in. So I'm really excited to have this, and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayako. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So I'm Benjamin. I'm the founder and currently CEO of Light Blue. So Light Blue is we are highly specialized in food waste prevention in the food service industry. So we design methodology, technology for food waste monitoring and tracking, as well as anything related to consulting on what we call food waste performance and financial performance analysis, as well as supporting our partners to achieve the Pledge on Food Waste certification system, currently implemented in about 12 countries.
Perfect. Thank you. And last but not least, Bijan, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you, and wonderful program so far that I had also the pleasure of reviewing many great ideas and actual implementations of activities related to an area that I really focus on. That's disaster and climate resiliency within the tourism and hospitality sector. This is what we do at Risk Layer and Hotel Resilience. So I was really excited to see some of the measures that hotels and destinations are taking in that regard, and would love to chat with you more on those types of themes.
Perfect, great. So yes, let's get started. If you from the audience, if you do have questions, please use the chat function. You can ask questions to our panelists. And maybe to set the context, what do you think has changed since the pandemic? How has the pandemic reshaped the priorities and the strategies of the tourism industry globally and in specifically Asia? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we start the other way around. Bijan.
Sure, yeah, this is an area quite close to what we do, and I think the pandemic was of critical importance to how the tourism sector is managing a crisis. It's a global event, affected everyone, and we had to quickly adopt stringent health measures and protocols we like to forget about. Now it's in somewhat of the past, but you know, businesses and destinations had to quickly invest into these comprehensive crisis preparedness strategies and deal with it. And I think that's a real opportunity going forward, because a lot of these crisis management protocols, you know, be it a communication plan or how to evacuate guests, roles and responsibilities, let's say within a hotel, can also be applied to other crises, right? Earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, not just pandemics. So that's a real opportunity, as well as the digital transformation that took place with digital technologies through COVID. I think those opportunities are key now to transforming resilience in the sector.
Perfect. Thank you. Benjamin, what do you want to add?
Yeah, well, that's so much to be said. Yeah, it was just to put things in context, because well, for us, it was like most of you, of course, like a serious storm. And it kind of forced us to reinvent ourselves in the context of this complete lockdown. From one day to the next, 95% of our customers basically do not operate anymore. So we used to work with hotels and restaurants, and in particular to deliver our solutions directly on site in the hotels. And so that forced to reinvent the way to support, the way to train, to consult, and to deliver solutions remotely. So I think that what Bijan was putting forward is key. The digitalization is one key component. So I'm speaking particularly in the context of food waste in the hospitality sector, but I'm sure it applies to many other aspects. And typically capacity building, as this is an important component, which is essential. The industry currently has shifted, I would say, when it comes to food waste. Again, really talking about our core expertise, has shifted from seeing it as, okay, well, first it was a complete denial, like we don't have food waste, to, okay, we have food waste, but not that much, to, okay, we have an issue, but we want a one single fix to all of our hotels, whatever the context. So give us some technology, plug and play, then we don't have to talk about it. To then I would say post COVID, realizing that, okay, well, you can't fix such a complex issue just with one technology or just with one, one tech solution. So change of perspective in realizing the importance of the issue, B, the complexity of that issue, and C, the expectations from the customers also shifting. And we see that typically large hotel groups are now being more open and more keen to adopt more elaborated solutions than in the past.
Perfect. Thank you. Sounds very promising. Ayako, what do you see has changed?
I think what is it partly, this is what I hope that it is something that we've experienced and managed to use the the new opportunities that the pandemic presented to us to change our industry is sustainability, to put it really simply. I think that we all know that there is a mixed reality. Some people really use an organization used the pandemic to really put sustainability forward within their organizations and made it a priority. For others, it hadn't been maybe not so strong. So I know that if you look at the whole industry, it's a mixed story. But I think there's so much that came out of the pandemic that pushed the awareness forward. And there's so much to be said about that. The fact that you can now talk about sustainability related issues, and a lot of people understand it, and that it's no longer a thing that you need to hesitate when you want to talk about. That alone, I think, has a significant impact on the industry moving forward. So I don't say this lightly when I highlight the opportunity that the pandemic has brought in terms of sustainability, even when you just look at the fact that this raised awareness of the importance of sustainability. And one related aspect of that I think is maybe very intangible and therefore may not be very well talked about, but is also just as important is the people aspect of it, because that is a key area of sustainability when we talk about sustainability. My hope is that the pandemic has really made all of us realize what is really important within our family, within our communities, within our organizations, our team members. And I hope that some of the things that we learned because of the experience, that we care for each other, that we're kind, we want to prioritize kindness. We want to make sure that our team members, our community members are happy and healthy. I hope that those are the things that will stay with us and put that in that category of things that we don't want to forget from the pandemic. If we all keep that with us, I think that we'll have more opportunities even to push our sustainability goals forward.
Perfect, thank you. And
yeah, if I may build, sorry, just one point on this. Forgot to mention clearly also on the awareness that has kind of shifted or increased when it comes to sustainability in general. Speaking again of food in particular, there was two aspects. There was this, well, kind of also realization that the globalized food supply chain has to be questioned. That you can't source, salmon from Australia when you are in Mauritius. There is a kind of something that doesn't seem right, but that was more triggered by the I would say the disruptions. But also what has played also in favor in that case of an increased interest on the topic of food waste is prices, inflation. Inflation has been dramatic for the hotel industry. We're looking at 20% difference over 2022, and it keeps on increasing. War in Ukraine and all those stuff. But in that case, I would say it's a relatively good news for the planet in that sense.
Perfect. Thank you, Benjamin. Let's stay with you then. You mentioned the value chain of the tourism industry, and what do you think? How can the tourism sector collaborate with other sectors to create a sustainable supply chain that minimizes food waste?
Well, there are several components. The first one are kind of relocalizing the supply. I think is pretty essential, and adjusting. I'm really looking at typically like the hospitality sector and even the restaurant sector. So localizing the supply of food, local ingredients, making it more seasonal, and train the chefs to also take that direction. That certainly helps in terms of procurement and reducing the carbon footprint of the sourcing of those ingredients. The second aspect is collaboration among the different players. So typically, when we are working with the destination, so for instance, we implemented an interesting project in Mauritius, where there was 10 participants implementing the Pledge on Food Waste certification. And one of the components, besides implementing and reducing food waste for their own benefit, is that the participants, those pursuing the certification, would look for other food waste solution providers. And those are active at different level of the food waste pyramid, being from the preventive side or being from the collecting the food surplus to redistribute for human consumption when suitable, to looking at if it is no longer and you don't go down to zero organic waste in your commercial kitchens, to how can you transform your leftovers into something valuable, and hence looking at who are providing solutions, being services or technology, to transform your leftovers into something valuable that is either transformed for compost, that's the ideal scenario where those nutrients go back to the soil, or transform, let's say, waste to energy. Not ideal, but better. Than the ultimate goal is we're trying to shift the industry towards zero food waste to landfill sort of mindset, which would be a massive win when you look at the percentage of organic waste that is ending up in the landfill and creating methane.
Perfect, thank you. And Ayako, I guess a similar question for you as well. What are some examples of effective approaches and solutions to integrate local communities into the tourism value chain? So more on the community side of things.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we heard a lot from sort of the our earlier in the program, those organizations that are working closely with communities to empower local communities, promote and protect local cultures, and so on. And I think that when one important way that all of us can improve our practices is really learn from those that are actively engaged in these areas that we want to improve our practices in. And today is a great example of that. There's an opportunity for all of us to be doing that. We've got to learn a little bit about and many organizations, tourism organizations across Asia, has an opportunity to learn from them, get to know them, and so on. But also importantly, I think that solutions are often localized and also specific to your own context of your organization. So what are some of your strengths? What do you bring to the community? What are some of the ways that you are special in the area that you operate in? Because what works very well, for example, EXO has been very successful in collaborating with communities across different destinations. What has worked really well for EXO may not apply to your organization because you operate differently, the products that you promote are different, and so on. So it's really important for us to remember, as we seek inspiration from other organizations that are doing amazing work, which we should all do. And that's an important part of learning and training that I also personally promote as well. But importantly, really take some time to consider your own context and know that when we say work with communities, when we say support communities and so on, we're talking about people, we're talking about relationships, and those things take time, rightly so. And do take that time, invest resources in taking that time to make sure that you are building relationships and trust. Only by doing so, you're going to be able to really understand where you can contribute in a meaningful way through listening and understanding, and taking time to do so before you start talking about what you can do and what your solutions are. Listening and understanding where the needs are and considering then your strength and what you can do, the solutions that you can together with the community build. So I think those are really important steps in looking at the opportunities that you potentially have, but really understanding how you might be able to optimize those using your strength. And also remembering that in many cases, because we're all passionate about tourism, maybe we consider travel and tourism to be the solution that should work everywhere. But it's also very important for us in tourism to remember that tourism is not necessarily always automatically the solution. Tourism is a tool. If you can incorporate the way that tourism can support communities into what you do, wonderful. And that's, again, a lot of examples that we have in the award program of doing that at the local level. But I think we need to have, Ben just mentioned this mindset change. We need to have this different mindset that we're not there to push tourism to communities. We're there to facilitate the way how tourism might be able to support local communities.
Perfect, thank you. You just mentioned something very important, I think, which goes into the resilience, is having patience and taking the time and building collaborations. So Bijan, how do you think can resilience be built into the tourism systems to better withstand future crises?
Yeah, so I can, build right on what Ayako was saying about mindset change and paradigm shifts, because that's really what's needed. Just looking at the evolving realities, impacts of climate change, we can just look at the crazy summer we have had behind us. It was the hottest summer ever recorded, with a litany of extreme events, from the heat waves, record temperatures, 52 degrees in Xinjiang, China, 42 no less in Toulouse, France, devastating fires in Greece and Hawaii, with all the stuff that we read about in the news, earthquakes and hurricanes. So, everything we do as an industry going forward increasingly has to meet this or pass this climate stress test. So for me, there's three particular challenges I wanted to highlight here, maybe along with Ayako saying, what does it take to achieve that mindset change or paradigm shift? And the biggest one is that tourism is not really sitting at the table when it comes to resilience building. We're not sitting at the table with emergency responders, with local authorities, planners, utility companies, all these groups that are responsible for making, risk management plans. Tourism is often not at that table, and I think that needs to change. In fact, tourism organizations, particularly destination management organizations, hotel associations, have a stake, an economic stake, and lots of knowledge and important value that they can bring to the table. So I think that has to change, and that's what you were talking about, Nia, in terms of collaborations and sort of a multi-stakeholder approach to achieving resiliency. Another challenge is that there's really an unclear picture of these climate impacts. They're complex, there's these feedback loops, high uncertainties associated with what it means, really in terms of local impacts. There's so much science on this, but it's often locked up and not really accessible, particularly for the tourism industry. It's in the hands of universities, insurance companies, reinsurance companies, government ministries, but it's not in the hands of DMOs or hotel associations or even hotels in terms of what it means on their operations. So we need good data, we need good information, but good digital tools to bring this data to bear. What direct and indirect impacts would it have on a destination? What's the cost of a disrupted infrastructure in a destination to a destination? How redundant is the infrastructure in a destination? Can it withstand the impacts of a historic flood? What's the impact on the supply chain, etc.? So there's so much that is actually in the science. It's out there. People are looking at this. There's good data on it, but it's not being used for specific actions that the tourism sector can take and get ready for. And finally, the last is this: we're at a very nascent stage when it comes to building more awareness and knowledge sharing in terms of specific actions that tourism can take. This requires learning from past crises. We started talking about COVID-19. Every event like the heat wave, the fires in Greece, all of these provide us with so much information in terms of preparing us in other destinations. Is that information being shared between destinations? How are we doing that? Actions like how to develop a resilience strategy in a destination, how to develop a risk-based tourism development plan, what are the appropriate regulatory and policy frameworks, financial incentives, construction codes. There are so many areas that need to be communicated better. So in conclusion, I think when it comes to resilience, just as it is with sustainability, tourism has to sit at the table and take a central, at least in countries with a tourism economy and destinations where tourism plays a major role, we need better data and information on how to, and ways of using that information to make more actions that are specific to the operations of the tourism sector.
Perfect, thanks. What I heard from all of you was the raising awareness and creating a space where we can share knowledge and share experience. And I think this event here is brilliant to do that, to bring together different stakeholders. So I think this is a very good first step, and I think that can be really be used as a brilliant example to do that and create that discussion around it. Bijan, you mentioned that the tourism industry should be sitting at the table and making destinations or supporting destinations and making them more resilient. Do you have any examples or any ideas of how a hotel or how a small NGO or tour operator or a tourism business could support a destination in becoming more resilient?
Sure, yeah, I can maybe mention two examples, sort of a top-down and a bottom-up. The top-down is a project we're doing with Visit California. So Visit California is a convening organization, right? It has the leverage to bring a lot of different tourism stakeholders together in the state of California. And they put this on their agenda. We need to have a resilience strategy for the state of California. And there are very specific actions that you can take, but most important is how do you get everyone aligned? And how do you build consensus on what are resilience metrics and how are we measuring those? So you can benchmark and monitor progress over time and have some agreements, because when we don't talk to each other, we cannot really take concerted actions together. At the bottom up level, so every hotel, we learned through COVID, had to come up with a set of protocols and response plans. So, do all hotels have a disaster management plan, have a resilience strategy? Can there be standards that, hotels can start sharing with each other? And again, measuring, how are we doing? First of all, how resilient is our building and the contents to, let's say, an earthquake or a flood? And then what are the systems within a hotel, like evacuation? How do I get early warning? What are my rescue and emergency supplies, to all the operational aspects of it? Do I have a business continuity plan? Do I know how to communicate with guests and visitors and external stakeholders? So there's a series of things that hotels can be doing, but again, in a concerted way, in a harmonized way, through good standards and good practice.
Thanks. You just talked about a little bit about the monitoring and the being data driven. Ayako, I know you've worked a little bit with monitoring and measuring the impact of tourism and responsible tourism initiatives. How do you think can the impact of tourism on local communities and the environment be effectively measured and monitored?
Sorry, I also want to build a little bit on what just Bijan mentioned, which is that when we think about the fact that many hotels and tourism organizations across the region have had to be here in the past few years, maybe implement, develop, or strengthen their existing health and safety measures and so on, which may have been a very difficult step and have been a challenge, but at the same time, we can consider this an opportunity. So any business that's operating in tourism already has some kind of systems to measure, monitor, and report on their performance. So even if they're not focusing on sustainability related goals and targets, they do have processes in place in some way, and maybe this has been strengthened thanks to all the COVID related measures that all the businesses were forced to take. Maybe there's an opportunity here, because I think that one of the most important and efficient ways of implementing, measuring, and monitoring processes with regards to sustainability performance specifically would be to make it part of what your organization already does, and to make it a part of how you work. Because if you are trying to set up a separate project for sustainability, and this is a separate team, this is a separate tools that you're going to use to only manage and monitor sustainability related stuff, that's going to become difficult to prioritize when, for example, something else comes up and you have staff shortage issues, you have budget issues, those things will be cut. But if you are able to now work on making sustainability really a part of what you already have, your systems, your operational systems, your processes, and the steps that you already have, the people, the teams that you already are engaged in measuring and monitoring your business performance, your priorities, make sustainability priorities part of those, so that you are, as a business, your organization, you're making sure that sustainability measuring and monitoring is not going to become a second thought when something else comes up. It is part of your performance. It is part of what makes your organization strong, resilient, and sustainable. So I think that's one of the most important ways that you need to approach sustainability. Again, not as a separate project, not just a CSR thing that you do on the side, but as part of your core competency. And I think that we, again, referring to this event, the tools that, for example, our sponsors have shared will be an important way to really take a step towards that for your organization. So if, for example, getting started on working with a tool that are available, I think all of our panelists have highlighted the importance of data. If having digital tools is going to help you with that, really get started, because I think for many organizations, getting started, taking that first step is the biggest hurdle, because maybe you feel that you don't have all the data available or accessible to get started. And I think that, again, changing mindsets, it's okay. You don't need to have everything 100% perfect to get started on sustainability measuring and monitoring. Important is that you do get started somewhere. And especially if you are working with partners, maybe taking advantage of these tools that are available, I think that you're going to be able to build up on your initial steps to improve your measurement, improve your monitoring efforts, and so on. So I really do encourage everyone to think about making, when you want to increase your measurement and measuring and monitoring efforts related to sustainability, make it part of what you do and who you are. Take advantage of the tools that are out there to help you with that. And most importantly, to get started by doing so.
Perfect. Thank you. Ben, is that something similar you've seen in the hotels or destinations you work with, that food waste is maybe a project not the most focus on? And has that changed?
Well, I get so much to share on this. Data is just key, and it's the next frontier, I would say. So applicable to sustainability or to many different fields. But for us, it became really central about 5-6 years ago, when we started to focus on measuring food waste. When at the very beginning, the initial impulse was I was shocked when I was asking simple questions to professional in commercial kitchens, seeing bins full of food and asking them, but how many kilos are in this bin? And what is it and why? And how much does it cost you? And to see this blank look on their faces and like, why would you ask? Was really like this, this moment was like, whoa, this is crazy. We are so far behind. And then realizing that indeed there was a dire need to measure and to get a great deal of data to surface, because no measurement equals no understanding about the severity of the issue. And that's 100% applicable to food waste in what we do. When we ask chefs typically or hotels, how many kilos do you think you're wasting on a daily basis? Well, they don't know. But their answer, their conceived idea is that they are wasting 3 to 5 times less than what is actually happening, because that's not part of what they normally do. That's not how they are perceiving their responsibility. So that links to many different aspects, including education and how we are training the future of hospitality on those topics, sustainability in general, and in our case, food waste. So we built a lot of bridges with universities and school of culinary schools, etc., to shift this mindset of the future generation, those that will be working in particular in the kitchen or in the hospitality sector. But data is key, because typically, to make it simple, when we're implementing our technology is called FIT, Food Intel Tech. The end goal is to get commercial kitchens to understand how much, when, where, what, and why is food wasted. Those key questions, if you can't answer them, then it's just guesswork, it's just gut feeling. So we want to stay away from this. And just like tiny digression here, when we speak on the food waste side to the hospitality sector, we hardly speak about sustainability. I know it may sound shocking, but there is unfortunately so much, greenwashing happening, plus a very, I would say, old guard that still believe that being sustainable is kind of for tree huggers and hippies and whatnot. So we stay away from this on purpose, focus 100% on the bottom line and very practical, tangible, almost cold approach to say, guys, well, this is how much, well, we see you're wasting. It costs you X $100,000 a year. This is how much you can save. That's it. Then we know we're going to measure by reducing food waste how much is carbon emission equivalent, a number of meals saved, etc., which are for the storytelling and the narrative. But we know that the angle, the way in, is not through sustainability. Do something nice, be kind, because they are not trained this way. It's not really their fault, and they are not reporting on this, beside the CSR reporting and stuff. So we build on data on an ongoing basis. And what's super interesting is to be able to dive deep into the operation, because if you take one hotel, I would say a mid-scale, large hotel, you don't measure food waste in one location. If you want to be thorough, you have to measure in multiple locations where food is either stored, prepared, served, or disposed of. So if you take large hotels, they would have like 5 restaurants, plus a canteen, plus a production kitchen, plus event. So that means that there are multiple locations where food is actually, is potentially wasted. So the idea is to be able to map this food waste generation points and be able to get this data centralized and then translate it into, okay, your issue is mainly at that location during that shift on this sort of items, so they know how to address it. But again, technology is enabling it. It's not a solution in itself. So awareness raising, capacity building is key, coupled with technology to get this information to surface. And then leadership, because I mean, for us on food waste, when the leadership is saying, okay, we're going to start implementing, for instance, the pledge on food waste certification, and we're going to give it to the sustainability coordinator, we're like, no, don't do that. I mean, those should be this should be done by the kitchen team plus the other related department. If you want to see result, it has to be transversal. Don't give it to someone who will come and talk to a chef, and the chef will be like, yeah, sure. Keep on talking. You don't know what is happening in my turf. So you need to have an approach that is transversal, but where the key decision makers are involved and held responsible. So hence the leadership as well that says, guys, this is what we're going to do. And to illustrate that point, I think one of the nicest, I would say, victory we've seen, and that was with actually with a Hyatt group, where we started with 1, then we had 8, and we actually became official food waste solution providers for the entire Asia Pacific region, because they decided to make it compulsory for each of their hotels to have a food waste monitoring system in place. That means that they tied the bonuses of the top executive to that specific requirement. And this is top-bottom approach, where there is one direction, guys, you stick to it, or you're going to be penalized. But it doesn't mean that that's it. That's the end of that's the miracle solution. But that's part of it, leadership, and then accountability, clear roles and responsibility, and data collection to really know, are we doing great or not? Again, we had this at the beginning where we started to collect information. The hotels wouldn't believe us. They would be like, well, large hotel would say, well, you have 1,000 kilo a day. They'll be like, what? We're like, yeah, well, we measure every single bin. Of course, if you don't measure, you think you're doing great. But now this is your situation. And one of the key metrics we're looking at is food waste per cover. So amount of food waste generated for each person eating. And we would bring that information to an all-day dining of a large hotel. We'd say, hey, you are actually generating approximately 1 kilo of food waste per cover. And you expect human reaction is like, oh my God, this is crazy. No, the reaction is like, is it a lot? So what matters to them is not like, am I completely off the charts in terms of my responsibility to the external world? Their genuine motivation was, are we doing better or worse than our competitors? Hence, what we are currently working on, which is benchmarking, and it's so difficult because there are plenty of components to take into account on the methodology, what is measured, the scope of the operation that is actually being captured, etc., etc. But key in driving also change, data comparison, and also then strict methodology as we have with the pledge, and being able to gamify this sort of commitment among each other. That's typically different levels of certification and different specifically percentage points of compliance that then the chef and their team will take personally, as in like, okay, I'm bronze, you're silver, you're gold, whatever. But are we doing better than our sister properties? Even though we belong to the same group, for them it's very important. So plenty of element that I actually raised that actually apply to the issue of food waste in hospitality.
Yeah, exactly. So you brought it up again, like sustainability needs to be integrated in all roles, in all departments. Everyone needs to play a role and be educated. And it's not just outsourced to one sustainability manager or a sustainability coordinator, right? Yeah. Bishan, maybe back to you. Thinking as well about the capacity building and kind of getting every stakeholder engaged, what would be your advice for countries or businesses looking to build a more sustainable and responsible tourism industry?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Ben just said. So I'm stretching my brain a little bit to see if there's anything else I can add to the conversation. I mean, I'll go back to, first of all, I see resilience as part of sustainability, right? So this is a side conversation, but it's you can't be sustainable if you're not resilient. And in terms of capacity building, there is a lot to be done when it comes to a business like a hotel and its staff, and getting everyone to kind of understand what would be their roles and responsibilities when an event happens, but even more importantly, before something happens. Simple things like cleaning the drains before a major flood comes through, making sure the window shutters are shut before a hurricane comes through. These are done in an ad hoc way. We've seen lots of it through experience that maybe a manager will bring in because they worked at another hotel and they had something maybe more stringent, but that information is not really developed or passed on in a systematic way. So I think that's one, this is Ayako's area really, but that's one wish to be had, is to, you know, think about ways of capacity building that is more transferable, more interactive, and it doesn't rely on a single person and their experience that they may have brought through. Yeah, and then really taking, you know, the silo response is often, when it comes to resiliency, is the security department, let's say at a hotel, because they do security. But we know resilience building cuts across departments and teams and starts with the general manager and how that leadership is sort of echoed and translated to all the other departments. So understanding your roles and responsibilities, but not seeing it as something sort of that you have to do on the side, but as integral to your job function. You know, as something that embraces that is something that also, you know, we've interviewed a lot of hotels. We actually developed a capacity building assessment for what it means to have a disaster risk management training program at a hotel. So these are some of the findings that came through. There's probably more than I can share at some point to whoever's interested.
Perfect, thank you. And yes, Ayako, you are the expert in capacity building. What advice would you give a tourism business in that area? How do we make training more accessible, more engaging, more interesting?
Yeah, I think that some of the things that I heard a lot in our conversation now is, obviously we talked a lot about the importance of data and so on. But what I took away also from some of these lessons have been that it needs to be, your approach needs to be meaningful. So that you're not just doing something for the sake of doing something, whether it's sustainability measurement or gathering data or anything else. So I think that applies also when you think about your staff or people that you work with, people that make it possible for you to be successful as a business and organization. And I think that one of the key themes that echoed throughout our conversation also have been that we need a mindset change. We need a new kind of way of thinking about what we're saying, sustainable and responsible travel, and how we approach this. And one aspect of it is really thinking that this isn't and shouldn't be a one-person thing, or this isn't something that, you know, an expert consultant will come in and do it for you. It needs to be something that lives in your organization as part of your organization. And if you're able to engage your team members and your partners in a way that they actually also feel that way, feel invested in your goal, in your aim to become more sustainable, and then it's more likely that you're going to be successful. So I think actually that even though I focus on and advocate passionately for sustainability training, I think that sustainability training on its own is not really the solution. I think it's more about really thinking and rethinking your relationship with the people that make your organization, your staff members, your team members, your partners, your community members, and so on. And starting there about who you are as an organization, how are you representing your goals and passions for sustainability? How do they understand what you stand for? If you're successful in having that kind of focusing on relationships, then what you do in training, it will come naturally. And I think, again, if you want sustainability training and sustainability capacity building to be sustainable as an initiative, as a department, as a program within your organization, my advice would be, again, not to separate it as a separate category of additional efforts that you invest in and then your staff members will need to spend extra time doing, but really make it part of all of the conversations that you have. I think in our session, we already highlighted a lot of how these topics around sustainability, waste management, resiliency, and so on is relevant to many different layers within organizations and different positions, right? So I think we really emphasize the fact that it isn't and shouldn't be a separate category of thing to be dealt with. In order for your sustainability related training and capacity building efforts to be successful, but not only successful in the short term, but sustainable in the long term, you need to make sure that this lives within what you do, and your staff also, and the partners and community members, the stakeholders feel that way, and as much as possible, make it a natural part of what you do and who you are.
Right. Thank you so much.
May I build on that? I echo 100%. I think you mentioned one thing, which is meaningful. I think that's essential. But I would highlight one for us. It has worked very well because working on a topic that usually is perceived as not an issue, we always start with the why. And I think this is applicable to any aspect, is to get people to understand why we need to work on this. And it works magic because people, if you relate purely to, okay, we need to do that because of the competition. Okay, well, I'm just getting my paycheck, right? If you relate it to something that, hey, look, again, looking at what we do, food waste, there are some social absurdity behind this issue. There is some dire environmental consequences. And basically, of course, financial impact of this issue, then you work on the rational and you work on the emotional side of things. And once you manage to get people to be able to say, hey, do you know why you're working on food waste in your kitchen? If they can answer that question, you know, half the battle is won. So for us, the why is always the starting point, and then the how is the next step. And what's interesting is that if the why is clear, then the how can evolve. You can provide some guidelines, can provide some tools, but then they will come up also with some interesting ideas and insights that, of course, you wouldn't have because you're not doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So to me, to summarize, the why is the cornerstone of a successful, I would say, implementation of sustainability-related projects in organizations.
Okay, great. Some great advice here. Now I want to open the floor to the audience. Maybe some of you have questions. I'm not sure if we have questions in the chat box, or if you want to also unmute yourself, you can do that and ask a question to our panelists directly.
I think Alex had a question earlier.
Yes, Ayako, thank you. Yes, I was wondering if when you were talking about measurement, if there is a real discrepancy between what people think the priorities are and what they turn out to be after measuring. Because in our experience, yes, we've seen that, and we were wondering, yes, because we put so much effort into measurements, and it takes a lot of time, resources, and yes, and conveying the why on something that's not really sexy, I would say. So, so it's like, is it really worth the effort?
Yeah. I think going back to what we mentioned earlier about sort of the meaningful connection to what we're trying to do, between what we're trying to do and what we do as an organization. I think that both happen often. That on the one hand side, there are a lot of organizations that maybe once they get started and really more systematically looking at different areas of impacts, they realize, oh, I didn't realize there's so much negative, as Ben's example, right? Like the people are just guessing and like, oh, we're probably doing well in food waste. But then once they realize that they actually measure and see the numbers and like, oh, this is actually a lot of negative impacts that we're creating. So that realization happens a lot. But I think the other way around as well happens often. Once you start measuring and really looking at different areas of your practices and assessing and thinking about your impacts, that there are a lot of findings that you will likely encounter where you say, oh, I didn't realize we're doing so well in these areas. And that is really important. And I think at the end of the day, the point of measuring is that you're going to be able to continuously improve and be able to see that improvement over time, right? You're using your data smartly for yourself and for your stakeholders so that you continuously improve your practices. In order for you to do so, once you get started and really realize those areas are like, oh, I didn't realize this was very negative, this was very positive. And then what's important is that to really take that time to do the listening internally and externally to really determine where your most important risks and impacts areas are, so that you can smartly focus your investment on time and efforts into making that improvements over time, because no organization can do everything all at once in 1 year, and that's not the point. But if you identify that there's an opportunity area where you can really reduce a lot of negative impacts with a small investment up front, and that's an area that you focus on. So you really, I think the once you get started, as I said, I think that if you are sort of hesitating to get started, I think these are the benefits of getting started, at least. Even the initial step of really simple checklist exercise will help you get started and really understand where you are currently and where the opportunities are. And I think it'll be really good to think about opportunities. You have brilliant opportunities to reduce your negative impacts that will continue to motivate your team, to become sustainable and support your organization's goals and so on. You will realize these opportunities where you already are doing a lot of great work that maybe you didn't realize. So that's an opportunity for you to internally and externally communicate more about what you believe in. So yeah, I think that these are benefits of really investing some time in understanding where you are, measuring and monitoring your performance so that you can improve, but also so that you can realize and get to know your practices better and find great opportunities for your organizations to get better.
Perfect. Thank you. Please, Ben and Bijal.
Yeah. I'll be very short. I just wanted to really support what Ayako was saying about starting small and taking small steps, especially in our area. We work with hotels to build resilience, and it seems unsurmountable. There's often a very nihilistic view also. Okay, if an earthquake comes, it's going to be destroyed anyway. What is there to do? And you kind of walk away from the problem. But there's really simple things that can be done, and just starting on that. We do a hazard hunt. We go around the property and you look for very simple things like exposed wires or drains that can be declogged, or just bracing of water tanks and things that might be falling objects in an earthquake. So those areas are relatively low cost, but high impact. And then you might start on a larger strategy and a bigger scope. And it's important, as Ben was saying earlier, to understand what is the financial benefit of taking these actions on things that might happen on a very large temporal scale. So it's really hard to communicate, for a 50-year life cycle of a building, what would be the cost. But if you're able to communicate that in the financial metrics, planning metrics, you understand that, for every dollar that you might spend in investing in activities or mitigation efforts, you will be, saving, fourfold, fivefold of that, potentially, depending where you are. These are the calculations that have to be made. And that starts to speak to people to take maybe more long-term view of the issues at hand.
Yeah, no, also very, very quickly, two typical example, where well, a bit related to what I was sharing earlier, the fact that they don't know the amount of food that is wasted. So to be able to tell them that the cost of status quo is, I mean, uncomparable to what you would need to do if you wanted to start addressing your issue, meaning that the investment is so small compared to what you are currently wasting, that if you knew, that would be a no-brainer. But that's the difficulty when starting from a field that has that many, I would say, research and I would say information readily available. But a typical example to your question, Alex, initially, yes, there is measurement is interesting, because one of the classic misunderstanding by the hotel industry is, oh, food waste is all about the buffet. And the classic reaction, but by the top hoteliers and top executive in international hotel chain, oh yeah, the buffet is the culprit. But no, guys, this is because you haven't properly measured and covered the entirety of your operations and collect those information and process those data. Because what we see on and on and on and on, that when you measure food waste from what is lost in the storage area, what is lost in preparation, what is lost at the buffet, and what is lost from the customer, buffet food waste only represent 10 to 15% of all food waste. So if they only knew that, they would realize that, okay, well, it is important to cover the buffet and even to rethink, do we really need a buffet? But it's not it's not the main area where you need to focus. And that's a classic example that, well, we came to realize that, and our partners also, is that, well, you should look at this issue, but it's really not the main reason. So to your question, I think it's a very good example of how data help to guide where the effort must be put.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I actually wanted to ask you the last question: what advice would you give to small businesses? But I think you've answered it really well already, with really taking small steps, understanding where we stand right now, integrating sustainability in all roles, in all departments, the bottom up, but also the top down approach, that it needs to really come from everyone, that we raise awareness, that we build capacity. So I think there was loads and loads of great advice for all of us. But still, I want to give you the opportunity to maybe share maybe one opportunity to see for the future, or something which you took out of the award ceremony just before, what really impressed you. So yeah, maybe just to wrap up this session, if you want to share some last thoughts. Ayako, please.
Yeah, one of the things that that I was thinking about this whole time is how great this program is. Alex and EXO team. Also because one thing that came to mind, because we talked a lot about measurement, and I think that this reminded me of an exchange, a conversation that I had with colleagues about some time ago, when there was an article that was kind of ranking the CEO of tourism companies that make the most money. And the question was, yes, great for them, very successful business people. The question was, is that a meaningful metric for our industry? Even not considering the sustainability context of it, is that something that we want to be celebrating? And that really stuck with me, because I really think that what we publicly celebrate and highlight and give the spotlight to really matters in sending a message to our industry, to the travelers, our colleagues and stakeholders across the tourism value chain, that we care this is cool, this is important, and these are the companies and organizations that should deserve our attention. And this is exactly what you're doing in this award program. And I think it's really important that we as a whole industry think again, look inwards and think again about who we are and what are some of the things that we actually want to be measuring and highlighting when we do things like, here's a big report on the top 10 of something. And we have so many great projects, as we learned today, right, within this session and all of the applicants. And I think that the more that we can do to push the spotlights to these great initiatives, the more that we can do to change the industry for the better. So that's my sort of final thoughts, again, going back to why this is great, because I really do think that this has been a wonderful opportunity, and thank you for doing that, everyone who's involved in pushing the industry forward in this great, important direction.
Thank you, Ayako. Ben, do you want to also share some last thoughts?
Yeah, I think mindset is everything. If the mindset is there, your team will follow. If the leadership is there, it's not all about the money. And yeah, don't listen to the naysayer. Don't listen to those that try to undermine your efforts and to tackle or to undermine your dreams. I think there's so much that still can be done. And tourism is a beautiful industry that is connecting people, and I think this is also why people should remain at the heart of the industry and at the heart of transforming that industry. Again, technology is an enabler to me, but if it is not built for people, we're gonna shift and kind of lose our soul in the process. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ben. That was beautiful. Bijan.
Yeah, so Ben highlighted mindset, and I'll highlight another theme that emerged here in our conversation, which is collaboration. You know, we just went through a competition. This, you know, some were awarded the prize, but you know, I was very fortunate to be able to look at the content that was behind the awards, and so you know, impressed with all the various activities that were going on. And one area that I was focused on, I was so happy to see not just climate action, which, you know, reducing carbon footprint, we know there's various tools that we're doing this, but also climate mitigation, which is so much harder. And there were so many innovative ideas and approaches there. So I was so happy to see that. And even though we went through a competitive process, it's organizations like EXO, Kiri Asian Trails that I've had the, you know, good luck to work with, where collaboration is being held up. You know, even though it's a competitive business, the idea is how can we also share knowledge where it benefits us all, create tools that enable knowledge sharing. And there were so much good practices that we were reviewing, and I'm wondering, you know, the way forward, how do you share some of those good practices and hold those for others to be able to follow as sort of guiding beams and lights? So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you. That were some very beautiful and powerful last words. Thank you so much. And thank you, Alex, and the whole EXO team for organizing this brilliant event. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to judge the projects and to actually learn more about them, to get to know new initiatives. It's been so inspiring, really, to see. And thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ayako, Bijan, and Ben, for being here and sharing all your insights. It's been really brilliant. And yeah, thank you very much for the event, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. So we'll see you all, I hope, and many more next year for the Sustainability Awards to be continued. So have a nice end of the day or afternoon wherever you are. And yes, let's reconnect very soon and stay in close contact with each other to lead and promote wonderful projects. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
the invitation.
Everybody,
Bye, everyone.
Everyone again. Thank you.
wonderful to see you
Bye.
all.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.